I think it's hard to be vulnerable. I think it's hard to say, I'm not strong enough to deal with something. You feel like everybody around you is dealing with, like, we all know life is hard. Everybody knows that. But I think you're like, well, life is hard, but they're dealing with life. And it looks like they're dealing with it easily. So I'm going to need to bottle this up. And I can't talk about it because, they're going through something, hard too. And I don't need to do that. But I think being vulnerable is hard. People don't like emotions. I know the amount of times I probably made people very uncomfortable crying. And I'm like, well, this is just who I am. But it allows people to open up. They're like, well, she is vulnerable and it's okay. She can get through her story and get through conversations and feel.
Sound of that tractor means it's time to go to work. You're listening to the Give Us the Dirt podcast powered by Hoopot Grading Company. My name is Brandon and I am your host. As you know, we announced that May is Mental Health Awareness Month and that we were doing a very special series. Today, we've invited a very special guest to join us and share her story. Today's guest actually volunteered to be here today with the hope that sharing her story, her journey, might help someone facing something similar. Please welcome one of our very own, Kimberly Henderson. Kimberly serves on the HGC Training Development Group in the role of Special Events Coordinator and has been with us since October. She's from Easley, South Carolina, is a proud Clemson University graduate. Go Tigers! Kimberly's energy, passion, positivity, and athleticism came in handy as a member of the Clemson cheerleading team. If you know Kimberly, that probably won't surprise you because she is always wearing a big smile and offering an encouraging word to those around her. So that might leave you asking, why is this bright, happy young person wanting to be a part of Mental Health Awareness Podcast? Let's face it, we all face things in our life that are unexpected, sometimes devastating, and can have the profound power to make us feel alone. Kimberly's decision to be here today stems from the belief that although it is her story, it's not something to keep silent. She hopes that by sharing her story that someone facing similar circumstance will find hope and encouragement to let others know they too need support. Kimberly, welcome to the Give Us the Dirt podcast.
Hello.
You've never been on this side of the podcast.
No.
I usually see you walking by as we've got other guests in here waving.
I like to do a little quick walk by, see who's in here, see what's going on.
I know it. And it always makes me feel good walking by because you're always smiling, you're happy. What are you, bebopping? That's what.
I'm a bebopper. Always bebopping.
You've only been with us since October, but it feels like you've been with us, like you've been part of this family forever. And it's amazing to me how many people know you in such a short amount of time. And do you know Kimberly? Yeah, I know Kimberly. She's the one that's smiling, the happy girl that's walking around all the time saying hello.
I mean, I feel like I have a lot of new best friends. They might not realize it, but they're all my new best friends.
They feel like your best friends. Although I'm kind of jealous because I thought I was the only one, but that's fine. I'll share you with the other 708 team members here at Hoopot too. So, in May, we talked about it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and one of the things that I think makes the conversation around mental health so challenging is that it's most often invisible. You don't see it. And we see someone and we think that we know their story. We think that we know what they're about. We see Kimberly bebopping around, smiling, happy, pouring love and encouragement and positivity into this team all day. And we think, man, we know your story. She's lived the best life. And it's just all happy things and everything else. But that's the issue with mental health is you never know. You never know what's going on in someone's life. It is an invisible thing that can be very real. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to dig into your story today. And I always like to start. I like to go back because I know this Kimberly, and I call her Burley. So nobody else can call her that. I'm calling her that. But I want to know. Tell me about little Kimberly. Oh. Tell me about growing up in Easley, South Carolina.
Oh, Easley, South Carolina. Yeah, I grew up on a farm down in Easley, South Carolina, with a pretty big farm. My parents, my dad. Inherited it, and so it was me, my dad, my mom, and my older sister, just growing up on a little farm.
What kind of farm? Farm animals?
We have lots of cows.
Okay.
horses sometimes.
Oh, you had all the things.
Yes, chickens sometimes, goats sometimes, everything was just a lot of farm dogs.
So did you have to do farming? Did you have to do the work?
No, my dad always said, Kimberly, please stop telling people you grew up on a farm. They're never going to believe it. So I would always use that as my fun fact is I grew up on a farm and y'all probably don't believe that. So no, I don't think I did much.
You didn't participate in any of the farming.
My dad finally got me a golf cart so I could, drive around the farm. But other than that, no, I did zero farming.
That's fun. Who did the farming?
My dad, my uncle, my cousin. Yeah. So they kind of took care of the farm, and then they would always have people who were just really generous with their time to come out and help.
So what were you into?
Cheerleading.
From as far back as you can remember, it was always cheerleading?
Yeah, I started 5 years old. My dad worked at Clemson, and I always wanted to be a Clemson cheerleader. That was my number one goal in life. So starting at 5, I started cheering and didn't stop until recently, I feel like. But yeah, cheered all the way through Clemson.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
So what'd your dad do at Clemson?
He kind of did a little bit of everything. He started as a grad assistant trainer, so he was part of the 1981 national football team, but was a trainer for all the teams at Clemson, and then was with the Alumni Association for a little bit, but the majority of his time he worked for IPTE as the executive director.
Oh, so you were in deep.
Oh, yes.
Y'all were,
yeah.
It was all orange.
All orange all the time. Like I said, my dad was a grad assistant there, so he graduated with his master's from Clemson. My sister went to Clemson. I went to Clemson. My mom did not go to Clemson, but she was definitely our honorary graduate because she might have been the biggest fan out of all of us.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me about Mom. What?
She was a kindergarten teacher. You think I'm like peppy and happy and smiley. I mean, she had more energy than most kindergartners, I think. So she was also a bebopper. Mm-hmm.
Kindergarten teachers, they are saints.
Yes, yeah.
They are saints.
Yeah, she had so much patience.
So that's where the bebopper,
the
positivity and the...
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And then you said you had a sister?
Yes, I have an older sister.
Okay.
Yep. So she's still down in that area. So she gets to be close to Clemson.
She wasn't farming either?
No, she was a golfer, not a farmer.
So you had a golfer and a cheerleader.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so was that the dream? That was your childhood dream, be a cheerleader?
Yeah, a Clemson cheerleader. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It wasn't to work at a grading company?
No, not till recently. Not till recently, right?
So you did. From 5 years old, you knew you wanted to cheer. You go to Clemson. Did you even have a choice?
Sure, I had a choice. I'm not sure my parents were paying for anything else, but had a choice. It was the only school I applied to. I was
Kimberly,
not.
you can go anywhere you want to go, but we will only pay if it's Clemson.
Yeah, I honestly didn't want to go anywhere else.
Yeah,
I wanted to be at Clemson. I was there so much growing up that I already felt like it was home. And then you get there and you hear about the Clemson family, and it is completely real. And you're like, I don't ever want to leave here.
You truly did grow up on campus.
Yeah, I did. I sure did. It was great. I feel like I still know everybody back there, so it feels like going home every time I go back.
Oh, that's so you were cheering. What did you study?
Education.
Okay.
Yeah, I was supposed to be a high school social studies teacher.
Okay.
And I never spent a day in the classroom outside of graduating Clemson.
So at what point did you realize that is not going to be?
It kind of was put into my lap that it wasn't going to be a choice in life at that moment. When I graduated college, it's crazy to think that there were no jobs for teachers.
Right.
And that now that's like the complete opposite. So
Right.
it's really hard for people to understand, but there was no jobs, especially for my specific realm of what I needed to do. So I ended up back in cheerleading. I was an event producer for 12 years, running some of the world's largest cheerleading competitions.
There you are.
Yeah.
Right back to it.
Right back to it.
Well, it's your love. You love doing that. And that's so did you were there during some pretty rough football years.
Yes. So yeah, everybody thinks of Clemson as the football powerhouse.
That was what was that? Tommy Bowden?
Yep. So freshman and sophomore year were my dear friend Tommy Bowden's football career ending years. And then Dabo came in the middle of my sophomore year. Okay. Yeah. So we were at the beginning of the Dabo era.
I think I may have been sending money to your dad at that time with the condition that we get a new coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Dabo came in, which I think I'm a huge fan of Dabo.
Yeah, I remember the press conference, and I feel like it's everywhere, but I remember that press conference of him being told that he was no longer interim, that we had hired him as the head coach. And
that was a great day.
It was. And I think people still didn't even know who he was on campus, even though he'd been our interim for, a few months. Yeah.
It is crazy. How long? That's been what?
That was, so he started in the 2008 season.
Wow. It's hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah.
So post-college, you come out, you realize you're not going to be a teacher.
Not going to be a teacher.
You're back into cheerleading. You're what do you do? You're hosting events and coordinating events?
Yes. So I'm pretty much planning everything leading up to the event, then directing the event, and then, tying up things and then doing it all over again. I mean, I was.
And where are you at? Where are you living?
Charlotte.
In Charlotte.
Living in Charlotte, but I was all over the country running the event. So I felt like I wasn't really here, but that's at least where my home base was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and so then the story takes a turn, right?
Yeah.
So you're out of college. You're an adult now. Your life's coming at you fast, and then something unexpected happens. Walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. So, like Brandon said, I graduated college, came to Charlotte, and Charlotte had really become my home. And I had started building good community here, good friendships here, and then October of 2016, really the end of October, it was almost Halloween, the principal at my mom's school had called my dad and said, hey, Leanne's really struggling walking down the hallways, not sure what's going on. And so my dad was like, oh, well, she is on medicine for seizures that she's had, her whole life. Was nothing new to us. And we're like, probably just the medicine. She probably just needs to work on getting different dosages. And then, so while we were waiting for her to just be able to get into her neurologist, she started to decline really fast. And then we were able to see her neurologist on November 17th, 2016. And then 9 days later, she died of a brain tumor, glioblastoma. So it was really sudden. So from October 31st to November 26th, that was the only time we even knew anything was wrong, so not even a month.
Wow.
But yeah, so 9 days from diagnosis of a glioblastoma, when we actually knew what it was, until she died.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you didn't even have time to process what was going on.
No, not at all. And I think it was so shocking because everything was just like, okay, go to the doctor. Then what are we doing next? Going to, visit a neurosurgeon. And then they were like, okay, well, we visited a neurosurgeon on a Tuesday and they had her in surgery on a Friday. And it was and the only reason it was on Friday because Thursday was Thanksgiving. Otherwise she would have gone in on Thursday. And so, it was just trying to make all these decisions constantly. And so you had no time to even process what was happening, what was going on. It was just more of like, okay, what's the next decision? And I had been in Clemson or Easley that whole time. I had a really great job that was able to just give me the flexibility to be down there with my family. So I was helping my dad, make these decisions and what was going to be best for mom. Yeah.
Wow. Kimberly, a lot of people have walked along, people that have received a cancer diagnosis, and but I don't know that I've ever heard of one that has from diagnosis to end of life being that sudden. And so you really don't get to deal with everything. You don't get to deal with the emotions. You don't get to really sit down and think about a plan or how we're doing this. It's coming at you so fast that.
Yeah, truly. You really didn't get to process anything. I remember calling my friends. I think I had them on speaker, where I could have a group call. And I was like, hey guys, my mom's going to surgery tomorrow. And I just now trying to get a hold of y'all to tell y'all this. Because otherwise, we were just literally just trying to get through everything. And we wanted to celebrate Thanksgiving as a family because we were like, oh, it's going to be a tough road if she makes it through surgery. But I don't know if that was ever even a possibility to us, was that she would not make it through surgery.
I was getting ready to ask you that. Did you ever, at what point did you realize how severe this was?
I think probably the Tuesday when we actually met with the neurosurgeon, and he still was kind of a little bit like, well, yeah, we're going to go in there. And I think he knew she's going to make it out of surgery, but I'm not sure. So glioblastoma, you don't actually survive it. There's no treatment. There's nothing.
So tell me what that is.
You can extend life, but you can't.
That's a tumor?
It's
in
a
the
tumor.
brain?
Yeah, it's a tumor in her brain, and it's actually kind of goes like hers was in the middle of her, close to the middle of her brain, but on her right side. So she had lost all ability to use her left side. So she was almost like somebody who had a stroke. I mean, she was in a wheelchair. She went from walking to a wheelchair within like 2 weeks because she just couldn't move her left side of her brain or her body. But the tumor gets in every, like, almost think of it as a spider web. It gets in the middle of it, and so you can't move the spider web around. You have to go in and try to figure it out to get as much as you can out. So, yeah. And she did make it through surgery. She just passed away a day after the surgery.
Wow.
Yeah. And crazily enough, which she would appreciate this, she died 20 minutes before kickoff of the Clemson-Carolina game. And so in my head, I was like, she just really wanted the best seat in the house.
She.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great way to look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was at home in time to have the best seat for the game.
Yes. And like I said, out of all of us, she was the biggest Clemson fan. So it was kind of fitting.
Kimberly, I cannot imagine what that does to your family at that point. So here it's been a crazy month, right? You get a diagnosis in October. Mom's gone here at Thanksgiving. What did y'all do? How did you? I mean, you didn't even have time to really breathe.
No, we really didn't. And the crazy thing about dealing with death is there's so much things you have to do afterwards. You know, you have to check all the boxes and you have to do all these things. So you're actually really busy. Yeah. And you don't really have time to grieve or to process anything. So you're kind of numb and shocked for a little bit. And then once all those things, you've checked every check box and, you know, made sure your list is done, then you can start the process. And that's when it becomes really hard because it's the realization of, wow, she's not here anymore, you know.
How long did that take before you were finally able to just be with yourself and your thoughts and grieve?
For me, I think it was around Christmas, so a month. And, you know, Christmas, I think, brought out it a lot because it was a holiday. I actually went home, you know, the week prior to Christmas to hang out with my dad. And I kind of realized what he had been going through because I go home to Easley, and it's a small town, and everybody knows you. And my dad grew up in Easley, so everybody truly, like, knew him and knew us. And you just go out to the store, and you run into people you know, and the first question they want to ask is, well, how are you doing? And you're like, I really just wanted to be an anonymous person today and walk in here and do what I needed to do and then walk out and not have to think about, you know, my mom dying or anything like that. And that was really hard. And I was like, wow, if Dad has to do this every single day, and not just in Easley, but in Clemson and, you know, his whole life, whereas at least I'm in Charlotte and I have, you know, not that many people know me and, you know, in that perspective. So I was able to go to a store. I was able to go to a restaurant and not see somebody who's always like, well, how are you doing?
I didn't think about that. Yeah, that had to be tough. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without someone.
I remember being in the post office
and they
crying.
meant well, and everyone means well, and they care about you. But at some point, you're like, I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to see the sad eyes. That's what I feel like I got all the time, where people just having like, how are you?
Like
with
the eyes I'm probably giving to you right now. I know it's hard.
Yeah, and it's hard, and it's like they mean, you know, they're trying to do what they think is best, and you're just like, I just want a moment where I don't think about this because I think about it every single second of my day. Yeah.
So there you are. You're grieving, and you're going through everything that, you know, from losing your mom, and that in itself would be enough to just wreck somebody and wreck a family, and to, but that wasn't the end of the story.
No. On February 20th, 2017, so 88 days later, I actually get a call from my sister, and she says, hey, and I could tell she had panic in her voice. She's like, hey, Dad didn't show up for work, and he's not at home, and nobody's seen or talked to him, and we can't get a hold of him. And I think this was like about 5 p.m., and I was like, what are you talking about? I just talked to him last night. I was coming off like a really large cheerleading competition, so I pretty much was sleeping all day, and I was like, and I was in Charlotte, and I was like, what do you mean? Like, we can't find him. And so I actually had a friend drive me down to Easley just because I was like, I know I'm going to be on the phone this whole time going down trying to figure out, like, where my dad is. And, I mean, at that point in your head, you do go to the worst case scenario. You're like, what do you mean? Like, has he been kidnapped? Has he been in a wreck and we don't know where he is? But a lot of things were, at least for me, adding up because his car was there. His keys were there. Like, everything was still at the house. And then on February 21st, the next day, the sheriff's office comes to our house to tell us that they'd found my dad. And he had committed suicide.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and just one dealing with that, like I said, 88 days later, yeah, you kind of go back into shock. Like, what is this? What's happening? But then because of who my dad was, it was on every news channel, every sports channel. I had people here in Charlotte who didn't know me well, who, I mean, that's how they found out, was ESPN or CBS Sports, because everybody was running, one, the story of him going missing because we were trying to find him, and then ran the story of his suicide. I mean, we had news vans camped out on our property, just trying to, you know, felt like get a shot of the family, or just kind of like say, you know, because he was found near our property, not actually on our property. And so it was just, you know, one of those times that you're like, I just wish people would leave me alone right now.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
And then having, you know, but then for me, it was starting all over of the checklist of all the things I had to do to get things done for my dad.
You hadn't even had time to deal with your mom.
We hadn't even tied
I brought
up my
this
mom's.
box of tissues in here for both of us. Okay, so we're going to have to share.
Sounds good.
Okay. I can't imagine. I don't know that many people could imagine. Was there any indication with your dad?
I mean, looking back, you can kind of be like, you know, hindsight's 20/20, and you're like, he definitely was really sad. But at the same time, you're like, we're all really sad. And for me, I think I was his person at that, you know, moment. And so he contacted me and, you know, was telling me he was sad. And for me, I didn't want to tell him I was sad. So I was telling other people just because I was like, I need to be strong for him because he, you know, he needs somebody to lean on. And that's me right now. So you kind of saw that, you know, he was sad, but then you would see moments of, you know, like, you're like, oh, he's getting his laugh back. And you're like, okay, you know, we're moving through it. We can see some light at the end of the tunnel. And then, you know, the next day he would just be really, really sad and like a shell of himself. He was the most confident person I knew. And I mean, he was asking me for every decision he made, he was asking for my opinion on things that it wasn't like he was asking my mom for her opinions on these. It was, he just couldn't make a decision anymore. And I don't think he could see that there was any light in, you know, in the tunnel. I think he was just completely enveloped into that darkness, and I think he thought he was a burden too. I think he was like, you know, everybody is moving on, as they should be. You got to move forward. Life's happening, but you kind of stay in this, you're staying in the same spot and everybody's moving forward because you truly, you know, you're grieving, you're processing, and you're not moving forward. Everybody else is. And so you just feel like you've become a burden on people. You lose your confidence, and it's winter and it's sad. And yeah, he
couldn't move on.
He couldn't.
He didn't know how.
No.
And I think, you know, I'm sure, you know, he found himself at what he thought was the absolute bottom and did not know how to get out of that. I'm sure at some point you found yourself there too. Yeah. Do you remember the bottom?
Yeah, I actually do. So he died in February. And like I said, you have a lot of checklists. You're checking things off, trying to just work through everything. And I'll be completely honest. I thought I was strong enough to get through this. And I was like, I'm strong enough. I don't need to see anybody. I don't need to go to therapy. I don't need to do any of these things. People lose their parents. I mean, it's a thing. People lose their parents. You can get through this. You don't, you know, need help or anything. And then I remember I was at lunch one day with one of my, you know, best friends, and she's like very gently was like, Kimberly, you know what? I will sit here and walk alongside you every day and cry at lunch. I'll do that every single day. But I will also walk alongside you and find you a therapist if that's what you want. And up until then, I mean, people had said things like, you should go to therapy, you should do these things. And I'm like, I would probably give them the correct answer of like, yeah, I'll look into it, sure. In my head, I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm strong enough to do this on my own, and I don't need help. And that day I literally looked, I mean, I didn't even give her like a chance. I was like, I need help. Yeah. And it's probably the 3 hardest words I've ever said was, I need help.
Yeah. And, you know, that's got to be one of the hardest parts of working on your mental health and focusing on your mental health is getting to a point where you're willing to say that, because just hearing your story, like, you are the perfect candidate for therapy after that, yeah. Right? I mean, if anybody was in need of help at a time like that, like you were.
Yeah.
And because that would be more than any human could handle. But in your head, you had rationalized it. Mm-hmm. And you said, I'm strong, I'm tough, this is normal. Yeah. I can get through this. Other people have done, and I'm just going to white knuckle my way through this thing.
Oh, and I told my dad, you know, before he died, like, you should go to therapy, and like was his biggest advocate to get to therapy. I was telling my sister, you should go to therapy. And over here, you know, and they would be like, well, you should too. I'm like, yeah. You know, don't worry about me. I got it. We're going to do it. And in my head the whole time, I'm like, no, I'm completely strong enough to get through this. And until that day, I don't think I realized. I mean, I remember I was sitting in McAllister's at lunch with my friend, bawling my eyes out. And I was like, this is completely warranted, but maybe I shouldn't be doing this every single day at lunch.
Yeah.
I mean.
Sounds like a good friend.
Yes. Very wise friend.
Yeah. So at that point, after I'm sure that you had to go through a period of grieving, but you've sat down, you've had this time with your friend, and you start to realize, hey, I got to deal with this.
Yeah.
And you became intentional about dealing with your mental health at that point. What steps did you take to make that a priority?
And well, for me, I told her I needed help that second, because I said, if I don't say it right now, if I get back to her tomorrow, I'm not going to do it. So for me, it was saying a lot of little yeses to make sure that I was doing it. And it was even to the point of like, Kimberly, you know what? Just go to the parking lot. You don't have to walk in. You don't have to go to therapy. Just get to the parking lot. And then I would get to the parking lot and I would sit there and I'd be like, okay, I can just have to check in. I don't actually have to go to therapy. I'm just going to check in. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'll check in. And then if I'm not feeling it, I'm just going to leave, because I had so much anxiety. I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I didn't know how we were going to talk about it. And then it was just, you know, I was like, okay, well, I've checked in. Well, I'll just sit here and wait for her. And then, you know, finally going in there. And that wasn't every week. It wasn't just like the first week I went. I mean, I went to therapy every week. And every week for probably 2 months, I felt that way. It was like, you know what? Just say yes to one thing. And it was really a true, like, step by step. Don't try to look so far forward, because that's when you see, like, how dark everything is around you. It's like, you know what? Just look down, get one step forward, and just say yes. And that was, now looking back, is the biggest blessing I've ever done is therapy. I recommend it to anybody and everybody, always. Now, it's one of the hardest things you go through is therapy, because you have to really look at yourself and work on yourself and work on how you react to things and why you feel certain things, certain ways. And it's exhausting and draining, but it is the best thing you can possibly do for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, because at that point, when you're dealing with a professional, you can't BS your way through that anymore. You can't sit there and say, I'm dealing with the problem, because they're reminding you, you are the problem. Yeah. Like, the problem is inside of you and what's going on. Therapy is the obvious place to go, right? What else did you do? What other steps? I mean, it sounded like you surrounded yourself with you. I've seen some of your friends. You got the most amazing group of friends that I've ever met.
I do, and I have.
You surrounded yourself with a great group of friends.
I have a very unique group of friends here in Charlotte. I mean, outside of Charlotte too. I had people who were just surrounding me and walking with me. But I have a cool group of friends here in Charlotte who just, you know, people who I would say shouldn't have showed up, who were just like acquaintances, or they were friends, but not like, you know, those deep friendships. I mean, they showed up, and they showed up big, and they walked alongside me, and they made sure, I mean, they held me accountable. They're like, okay, we know you have therapy today. Hey, are you sitting in the parking lot? Because we know that's probably where you are. And then checking in with me an hour later to be like, okay, how was therapy? Just as a accountability to be like, okay, And every time I was like, oh, it was so good. I got so much out of it. And it just felt like a weight lifted off every time I went. But yeah, it's finding community.
Yeah.
We aren't built to do this life alone. So we don't need to think that we can do life alone and that we're strong enough to do it alone. Life's really hard. So surround yourself with people who can come and lift you up when you feel like you can't get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. Having that team around you.
No, for sure.
What about your routine? Did you have to change your routine? Were there places you couldn't go anymore? Were there certain movies you couldn't watch anymore or songs you couldn't hear on the radio?
I mean, most songs just in general, because like I felt like I was just crying every day to work because I was probably listening to the saddest songs of all time. But that's, I think, how I dealt with it, how I was like grieving, is to like listen to other people, experiences. I mean, I dug into reading lots of books on, either suicide or therapy or just death in general. And that for me was just being able to connect with people who have kind of done similar things. No two stories are the same. Even me and my sister, we lost our parents the same way, and we have dealt with it differently. Our experience with it is completely different. So it's just nice to kind of be able to read or listen to podcasts about people's experiences and just know that, like we have some similarities, and I'm not crazy for feeling this way. And that was like the biggest thing between therapy and, just talking to your friends and listening to podcasts or books and seeing, hey, you know what? That is, I can relate to somebody with those and be like, okay, this is a normal part of grieving, and it's okay to feel this way right now. So it's okay to, feel like the waves are crashing on you. I found the best analogy for grieving, and I've shared it with a ton of people because I think it's the best thing, but it's like in the beginning, you're in the middle of the ocean and a wave is hitting you, a 50-foot wave is hitting you every 10 seconds. I mean, you cannot catch your breath. And you just are like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to drown here in this grief? And then eventually, whether that timetable looks like, months or years, eventually those waves are they're not hitting you as fast. They're still 50 feet, but they're at least having like a few minutes in between each wave. And then eventually those waves get smaller. They're like 25 feet, and then they're 10 feet. And then you're just kind of wading in the water. And even to this day, I'm 7.5 years later, and I can now at least see the wave coming and know like, hey, this week's going to be a hard week, between holidays and birthdays and anniversaries and whatnot. So it's just like, to me, I was like, that was something I like held on too tight. It was like, okay, it's okay that I feel like I'm drowning in grief right now.
Kimberly, that is such a beautiful analogy of it. And that is so important for people to hear, because the hardest part is what you were able to overcome is that you can't see that far in the middle of it. At the bottom, you can't see that the waves are going to go away. And as many people that are telling you that it's going to be okay, you can't see it. And you can't believe it. Yeah. So to hear from someone that's been through what you've been through, to say, you just got to keep going, and you got to surround yourself with community. You have to talk. You have to share your story. And I think that's one of the things that when I was first getting to know you, I actually heard your story from someone else. I didn't hear this story. I've actually heard things today I didn't know. Yeah. Which make me love you even more. But I had heard your story from a teammate, and then I heard it from another teammate, and I was like, well, man, she's pretty open about all this. I'm just going to ask her, because I was a little afraid to talk to you about it. It's not a comfortable thing to talk about. I was afraid to ask you until I had heard that you have already shared this with so many people. You have been very open about your story. Why is that? What is that for you?
For me, I have deep faith, and I was just like, I'm still here on this earth, and I need to be sharing this story. And if it can resonate with one person, then I feel like I've done my job. But it's not a story I feel like needs to be withheld. It's just with mental health. Like, we don't need to withhold how we're feeling, because I think we have to work through it. If we're not working through it now, we're going to work through it later. And later is going to be a lot worse than, chipping away at it now. And so for me, it's like amount of times, I think we've even been together in a meeting and I bring my story up very regularly. I think people around the world have heard it because I travel a lot, and the amount of times I'm in a lounge and I'm just chit-chat with somebody and something comes up and I'm like, you know what, this is the perfect opportunity to share my story. And, recently at a meeting we were both at, I said something about it, and the guy came up to me later and was like, I really appreciate that. My aunt actually committed suicide 2 weeks ago, and we're, in the depths of it. And it's just nice to see somebody kind of on the other side of that.
Isn't that something? When you're brave enough to start it and open it up, all of a sudden people feel freedom to talk.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard so many things just after saying it. And like you said, you look at somebody and you think you know what their life is. And the amount of times I've told my story, and the second, they come back and I'm like, you've had a hard life too, or you're going through something hard too, and it's okay. And you're going to get through it. And it's really hard to hear that, to be like, you're going to get through it. But just being able to kind of be like, I've walked through some dark times, and it does get better, but it's okay to not be okay right now. And it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay to really feel big.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for being so willing to share your story. And if impacting one person is the goal, you can check that off because you have impacted me in a huge way just by listening to it. And, I am curious, why do you think people struggle to talk about mental health? Why is that? There's a stigma around mental health, and people they get uncomfortable with it. They get uncomfortable with the idea of talking to people, therapists.
Yeah.
Why do you think that exists? Because it shouldn't be that unnatural.
Yeah. I think it's hard to be vulnerable. I think it's hard to say, I'm not strong enough to deal with something. And you feel like everybody around you is dealing with, like, we all know life is hard. Everybody knows that. But I think you're like, well, life is hard, but they're dealing with life, and it looks like they're dealing with it easily. So I'm going to need to bottle this up. And I can't talk about it because, they're going through something, hard too, and I don't need to do that. But I think being vulnerable is hard. People don't like emotions. I know the amount of times I've probably made people very uncomfortable crying, and I'm like, well, this is just who I am. But it allows people to open up. They're like, well, she is vulnerable, and it's okay. She can get through her story and get through conversations and feel.
Yeah. And you said something there that I think is really important. I think so many people believe they're the only one.
Oh, yeah.
They believe they're the only ones dealing with it. And if they choose to be vulnerable, then they're going to look crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's going to appear like I'm crazy or I don't have my mess together.
For sure.
But the reality is you're not the only one. In fact, if you've got it all figured out, you would be the only one.
1,000,000%. And I'm glad you said that, feel like you're crazy. I remember after my dad died, before I started going to therapy, I was struggling with short-term memory loss. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am legitimately going crazy. I mean, people would tell me something and I was like, you never told me that. And they're like, we literally just talked about it 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And you even responded to it. And I was like, huh. I mean, they would be able to show me emails that I was responding to. And so at that point I was like, I'm crazy. I was like, even going into therapy, I was like, she's going to think I'm crazy if I say I have short-term memory loss. I can't remember things. And then you go through it and you're like, huh, okay. So this is a normal thing to be dealing with, after the trauma I've gone through. And, so it's just but even other little things that I just did probably before. And she's like, no, these are normal things. And it's just how you react, and just learning how to work with that in your emotions and work with that in work or in your friend group and whatnot, and just working on yourself.
Yeah. You've been around this industry since October.
Yeah.
And you see, we got a lot of prideful people in our industry, a lot of strong people that probably believe the same thing that you believe, that, hey, I can deal with this.
Yeah.
I don't need to talk about what's going on. How do we, I hope somebody's listening to your story and that's enough to cause them to think, hey, I'm not strong enough. It's okay. I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one feeling this. It's okay to talk to someone about it. But I think we've got to get rid of that stigma that mental health is synonymous with crazy. It's not.
It's not at all.
It's not. It's dealing with no different than our physical health. We care about what we eat and care about, going to see the doctor, working out, doing things that take care of us. It's no different than that.
And the thing with mental health is it's just important as your physical health, because if you're not taking care of your mental health, your physical health is just gonna go downhill as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the little cracks are gonna start opening. Like I said earlier, if you're not dealing with something now, you're dealing with it later. And dealing with it later is going to be way worse because there's so many cracks now that, you didn't even realize that it was affecting parts of your life because you just pushed it down. But if you're able to just kind of chip away and work on little things, every few weeks or every month and whatnot, you're able to just kind of be like, that's not nearly as hard because I'm, keeping up my maintenance of my mental health than just being like, 10 years from now, this thing's going to be like a bomb went off and I don't know how to put all the pieces back together. So it's just more of just like, like I said earlier, the 3 hardest words are I need help, but they're also the 3 bravest words you can say. Mm. And for me, I get told this a lot, and I always, kind of deflect that, I'm the strongest person anybody has, that people have been around. And I'm like, thank you, but that's really, I always say it's Jesus. But at the same time, it's like, because I'm open about my mental health and because I'm open about my story, has made me the strongest person that people know. So it's not a prideful thing to be like, you know what, I'm really, strong. And, I guess it was prideful because I was like, I'm strong enough to deal with this.
Yeah.
But now being like, hey, I'm really open about this. And this is actually what makes me the strongest person.
Yeah, I agree. Show me the person that doesn't need help. That's the one I want to meet.
Yeah. I can tell you they don't have it all together.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. So the reason I wanted to understand the steps you took when you were at the bottom there and how you found a way to move forward, is because clearly it worked, right? Like you bring so much joy into a room. You bring so much enthusiasm and passion and just appreciation for people, community, and for life. And so, unless you're just fooling everybody, like this has worked for you, and you're in a good place. I'm sure you still have the waves.
Oh yeah,
you're still dealing with the waves, but what the process you went through has helped you.
Oh, for
Would you
sure.
agree?
Oh, 1,000,000%. And for me, I mean, I've done a lot of different things, worked on myself a lot, but I will tell you, I had a great therapist, and I was lucky that it was the first therapist I met with. A lot of people quit after their first therapy session because they don't like the person. But I'll tell you, just find somebody else. There are plenty to go around that you can find somebody that works for you. And to just, keep persevering until you find that one that works for you.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to flip it on you a little bit. I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Okay, I'm ready.
I want you to be the therapist for a minute.
Okay, I'm really ready.
And I got 4 different people that you want to talk to, that I want you to talk to right now.
Okay, sure.
I want you to talk to that person that's struggling and doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Doesn't know what first step needs to be.
Yeah, well, the first step is just to acknowledge it, is to say, I get it. You're in a dark, dark spot. But you know what? What are those first steps? What do you think, where has your joy brought you? Like, where is joy in your life?
Who do they acknowledge it to?
A trusted confidant, a friend, a wise person. But for me, it's like anybody close to you. They should be the ones who are on your team, and they should be the ones that want to help you. I mean, my first people were, those closest to me, like, I need help. And they surrounded me and were like, we'll get you help. Like, that's what they're there for. Yeah.
So step 1, if you are dealing with something right now, just talk.
You have to open up.
First step, you've got to take the first step and say the 3 most important words. I need help. Yeah. All right. Talk to the person that doesn't think they're struggling.
You know what? Acknowledging them too. I know you don't think you're struggling, but at the same time, I'm going to give you the same advice. Just go talk to somebody. And because sometimes just talking, you realize that, hey, you know what? I am struggling in things in life. We I don't know. I feel like we always like to talk about very like surface level things, and we don't get in the weeds much, and we don't get in depth much. And most people, know people on the surface. So it's like, why don't you just go have a conversation, a deep conversation with somebody, and you're going to figure out that you are probably struggling in some areas.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're not all meant to be struggling through really tough things 100% of the time. So sometimes you're in a good spot, but just know that probably a dark moment is coming if you're not there right now.
I think that right there is truly important. Maybe you're not struggling.
Yeah.
But it's not a matter if, it's when.
Yep.
And I think about our military. They train for scenarios that they may never ever encounter, but they're ready for them in case they come up.
Yep.
And they know how they're going to get through it if they do. So whether you think you're struggling or not, like, you will. Exactly. It's going to come. Be prepared. Focus on your mental health and have someone that you can go talk to.
For sure. It's like my little workout group. We say that we're training for life. Well, it's the same with your mental health. Why would you not be training for something that could pop up later down the road?
Yeah.
So just getting there.
All right. Talk to the person that's got a friend that's struggling and they feel like they need to press in.
Oh yeah, this one's tough. I actually have been on both sides of somebody gently nudging me and somebody abrasively telling me what I should do. And for me, somebody telling me what I should do without the gentle nudge made me want to do everything the complete opposite way. For me, just be with that person, be empathetic, and just gently nudge them in a way. But I think you need to sit there and be like, I'm acknowledging that you're hurting and you're in your dark spot. And maybe, for me, it was friends being like, I'll sit here with you every day, but I don't have the words to tell you how we're going to move forward because I'm not a trained professional.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, just like, oh, okay, that makes more sense than somebody just being like, you need a therapist. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I do.
You need to shut up.
Yeah, I'm right. Sure. You don't think I've already, crossed that bridge in my head?
Yeah.
So.
That is great advice. And so to that person that has someone in their life or their community that they think might be struggling or is dealing with something, your advice is be present.
Yeah.
Just be there.
Yeah. Be
empathetic and be quiet.
Yeah.
Like, don't try to solve the problem.
And that's not your job to solve the problem.
Right.
Because all you're going to do is it's going to get better. And and you're like, it's going to get better, but you don't know how to take the steps to get better. Your friend, whoever you're talking to, doesn't know those steps either. But if they can just sit there with you, and eventually you're going to be like, if they do it the right way, they're going to be like, oh, okay.
But
I need to see somebody.
They also need to move in.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you can't say, if you've got someone that is dealing, don't do nothing.
Don't do nothing. No, absolutely.
You need to press in. You need to ask.
And I will admit, like, I personally was not suicidal, so it wasn't like they needed to jump in immediately. Like, if we knew where my dad was, I would have been the first person to take him to a hospital. I would have jumped in. So there's definitely different degrees of how to deal with people. Obviously, if they're harm to themselves, that's a totally different story than somebody who you just see is struggling and is in that dark tunnel and just needs a nudge and a friend and somebody to listen.
And it may be an extra question or two. You may have to dive a little bit deeper than, Kimberly, how you doing today?
You know what?
You're going to say what?
It's great. Everything's great.
Right. And I'm going to say, Kimberly, how you really doing today?
Yeah,
and then that's a different question.
Or even ask, like, what are you struggling with right now?
Yeah.
But what's going good in your life?
Yeah.
Kind of asking those questions a little bit deeper. Like I said, let's get away from surface level and dig a little deeper.
And to that person that's been selected as the person I'm going to talk to, Kimberly, I'm going to come to you and tell you I need help. What do you say to that person? All right, so you've been caught off guard. You don't know how to deal with this. Someone's just come to you and said, "Hey, I need help." What advice do you have to them?
Firstly, like, what kind of help do you think you need?
Ask what kind of help.
Yeah, because it might just be like, I just at this moment need to talk to you. But if it's like, I think I need to be in therapy, you know what? Let's do this together. Let's find you a therapist.
Yep.
And if I can't do it, let's put you in contact with other people who can do it. just kind of, using those resources and being able to kind of guide them and know that and let them know they're not alone. That's the biggest thing, is you just feel so alone and a burden sometimes that you just are like, hey, no, we're doing this together. I'm not letting you do this alone.
Yeah. But don't dismiss it. If someone shares that with you, don't dismiss it as...
No, absolutely not. That's the worst thing you can do.
Because it took a lot of courage and a lot of strength for someone to come say that. So
remember, the 3 words I said are
serious.
the hardest one. If somebody's coming to you and saying they need help, that was the hardest thing they probably ever said. Yeah. So you need to be there to be like, wow, I'm, really proud that you were brave enough to say you needed help.
Kimberly, you are amazing. You're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for just your willingness to be open and vulnerable and share your story. Just when I thought we couldn't love you more, I'm sure after this, everyone will love you more. And you have inspired me to be more vulnerable and to talk and to not disregard the importance of mental health and focusing on that, not just in my own life, but in those around me, talking and being present and being empathetic to whatever may be going on, because it is invisible. Yeah. And sometimes mental struggles with mental health can hide behind smiles.
Yeah,
they can hide behind bebopping.
Oh, yeah,
and so we have to press in. We have to dig deeper.
Yeah.
Kimberly, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Give Us the Dirt. Our podcast is powered by Hoopaw Grading Company in Charlotte, North Carolina, and produced by Well Run Media and Marketing. Visit our website at giveusthedirtpodcast.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple and Google so you never miss an episode.